Welcome, fellow intrepid Zoho pioneer, to Deluge for non-programmers. Now, if you're like me, you're mostly self-taught. Zoho's not a very complex platform to really get used to. You can make a lot of the adjustments you need on the front end, a little bit of Zoho flow here, a little bit of Zapier there, some third-party extensions that you found on the marketplace, and you are golden. However, if you're like me, you're eventually going to get a client requirement that makes you beat your head into a wall because you can't figure out how to do it. You've checked all of your options within Flow and Zapier. There's no workflow rule action, no field update, no nothing that's going to allow you to make this action happen. You don't want to get into Deluge, but you're forced to now, which is why you've come to this course. I'm here to tell you that I was just like you. I do not have a developer background. I am not a programmer by trade. I'm also here to tell you that, like me, you can pick up Deluge pretty quickly and very quickly be doing enough in it to answer 80, 90, 95% of the hard problems that your customers are going to face you with. This language is not that complex. It's fairly straightforward. You don't need to read big tomes on programming. You don't need to take big, long courses. There's a lot that you can do in a day just by watching this video and tinkering around. So take this course, learn what you can. Hopefully this is a gateway to you to learning how to understand some of the more complex Zoho problems and how you can solve them using Deluge. Okay, I figured this course would be most helpful if we thought of a use case, right? Let's do something with Deluge, with a custom function that we wouldn't otherwise really be able to do. So here's the use case. We have contacts in our contacts module that we put address information for. Obi-Wan Kenobi lives at the Jedi Temple. What we want to do is when we update the address information on a contact record, we also want it to update on the account record. It's such a drag to have to go in and edit it on the contact record and then also go through to the account. It would be really nice if that just happened automatically anytime the address is updated on the contact record. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. Obi-Wan Kenobi might be going through an address change here. The Republic's fallen, needs to move to Tatooine. So we want to make sure that pipes through to his account. Okay, let's show you where we go to actually create custom functions. There's multiple ways to get to it. If you know another way, do what you feel comfortable with, but I'm going to show you the way that we learned that usually is the easiest. Go ahead and click on your settings. Under automation, you'll go to actions. You'll see this little functions tab. Boom, click that. And then click the configure function button. And there's a gallery with pre-made functions. You should definitely check that out as you're starting to understand how they work. Could really lead to get some good inspiration. Functions that have been created by others in your organization, you probably don't have any if you're watching this course, or you can write your own. Feels good to write your own. So we're going to name this contact account address update. For the actual function name, you're going to need to make sure that you have underscores. There can be no spaces. Now for the display name, we'll just call it the same thing with no underscores. Contact account address update. Now here's a good thing to think about. We do create functions and module specific, right? Like you're creating a function that's going to be running in the contacts module. You can always duplicate your function down the road if you wanted to be in another module, but in this case, like we talked about in our use case, we are creating it for the contacts module. So click next, and boom, we have a nice, pretty function editor. The first thing we're going to talk about is this handy little edit arguments button. Now, if at any point in this video, or I guess in the entire course, you're having questions, just look at the documentation we've added to the lesson. We'll put in linking records and help documentation you can read that hopefully will help you understand it a little bit better. So the edit arguments button, the idea here is that we are telling the function which information it's going to take at the very beginning. What info is it going to pull in directly from the contacts module that we can start using in our function? Now, a lot of different Deluge developers will tell you to do different things here, and I'm open to flack that I may get for the following. Here at our organization, we actually only ever pass one single value, almost always, and that is the ID of the record that we are going to be pulling. I'll explain more later in the video. You don't need to worry about it. All you need to think about now is the contact ID, the actual 19-digit ID that Zoho assigns to each record. We are pulling that contact ID into our function. So all you need to type, and we do this all caps, you can name it how you like, but in our case, we'll call it contact underscore ID. And right here it says type a little hashtag to choose a value. It actually lets you add it as a merge field. So you do hashtag, module, contacts, and select contact ID. Now that is the first and only, in our case, argument that we are going to be pulling into our function. All right, get prepped. You're about to type code into a computer. You can never go back. You are now going to become one of those people that talks to your programmer friends and they're like, I was working on this. And you're like, oh, in what language? And they say, oh, Java. And you're like, as if you understand what the heck that even means. You're about to become that person typing code into your computer. Just type in everyone's favorite brand name, Zoho period CRM. Now, the inquisitive among you might type in other Zoho apps, and you're going to find some really cool stuff. I want to show you CRM first. You type, these are called Zoho Deluge built-in functions. These are functions that Deluge is ready-made to do. There's a lot of cool stuff in here. I think you should spend some time playing with it. In our case, we are going to do get record by ID. Before I show you that though, I want to show you real fast the other Zoho apps. You can type in Zoho Invoice. Here are the options you have in Zoho Invoice. Zoho Books, you have a lot in there. Bookings, they've added that. I didn't even realize, never looked at that. All of the Zoho apps, almost all of them, are available, have a lot of commands you can run in Deluge. So that hopefully gives you an idea of all the different things you can do across the entire Zoho suite with these custom functions. Now let's get back to CRM. We're doing zoho.crm and just trust me on this, you're doing get record by ID. So scroll down and select that. Now what this is asking us is for a module, and we just trust me on this, type this in and I'll explain why later. Just type in quotation mark, contacts, make sure to do a capital C, this is case sensitive, and then highlight where it says number and type in contact underscore ID, all caps, again, case sensitive. And this is the variable that we pulled in at the very beginning. And again, the following things, just trust me on them. Put in a semicolon after your parentheses. And finally, click back to where it says Zoho. And we need to name this action. So we're going to call it contact record equals, boom. That is our first line of code. The following videos will explain what the heck you just did and what it's doing, but for now, revel in the fact that you have written a line of code. In another course, I might explain all the reasons why we need to have a little semicolon at the end of each line of code. Suffice to say, just put a semicolon at the end of every line of code. Basically, that is what tells Deluge that you're done with a line. So it stops reading it and goes to the next line and runs that. So just remember, if you're ever having issues with a function, if it's not saving correctly, it's probably because you forgot to put a semicolon at the end of your line. All right, I'm now going to show you a really handy trick that will help you immensely as you go from beginner to expert. Literally, we all use this all the time. The idea of an info function. So we now have this action. We're essentially getting a contact record by its ID. But again, I don't want to just explain it to you. I want you to show you and help you understand what's happening here. So go ahead and type into your second line, info, contact, record, semicolon. Remember that semicolon. So you'll notice this is the same name as is in line 1, info, contact, record. And now we're going to do a really, really cool thing called save and execute. Before you do that, you're going to need to do one thing. Go back to your contact record. Go back, contacts, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Fun fact, the ID of any record in Zoho CRM, or most of the Zoho suite, is stored in the URL. That's how it knows how to navigate you to the right record. So you can double click and copy paste this ID. Now you have it in your clipboard. Let's go back to our CRM function and click on the save and execute button. Now what this is doing is it's going to save the function, number 1, so that's good. But number 2, it's actually going to execute the function. It's going to tell us, it's going to run the code and tell us in this info statement what it's getting. So let's go ahead and click save and execute. And now it's going to ask you, please input values to arguments. Remember, we edited our arguments up here at the very beginning. Remember how we talked about that's us feeding information into the function so it knows, hey, I need to start with this data and then I'll run the whole function from there. Well, we only asked it for one thing, and that's the contact ID. What did you just add to your clipboard? The contact ID. So it's asking, hey, I want to try running this function. I want to try executing it, but I need something first. Well, what do you need? You need the contact ID. Click here, and we will just paste and click save. And some stuff happened. Let's talk in our next video about all of this stuff, this JSON, but you can see in these nice pretty green letters, the function executed successfully. Good work, team. All right, time to demystify all of this garbage. This garbage is called JSON, J-S-O-N. I totally forget what that even means. I'm sorry, I'm a non-programmer after all. But essentially, it's a way that Zoho is storing all of your data in such a way that the computer can read it and understand hierarchies and relations and all that cool stuff. Let's demystify this a little bit. I want you to do exactly what I'm doing. Open a new tab, find Google, find your search engine, and let's search for, just type in these words, JSON Viewer into Google. I'll put this link in the lesson as well, but this is this is the JSON viewer that I've just been using. I'm positive that a better developer uses a better one. I'd love for recommendations for a free viewer, but in our case, this will work. Click on the online JSON viewer. It asks you to text or to copy paste some of the text. So let's go to our function and to this info statement. We'll copy paste all of this nonsense, copy, and then we'll go back to our JSON viewer, click here in the text box, we will paste it. This still is a bunch of garbage, but we'll click into the viewer. And here you can see what's happening. What is all of this stuff? Well, these are individual Zoho fields and the data that's in them. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. You can see it on the right-hand side as well. You look and you see, okay, there's the created time. Oh, that's actually a date. Okay, cool. The date of birth. Oh, that's null. Okay, that's good to know. Email, well, we don't have an email. ID, we do have an ID. Full name, Obi-Wan Kenobi. First name, Obi-Wan. Mailing city, mailing country. What we've done in this get record is we've gotten all of the data corresponding to our contact ID to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we pulled that data into our function. We now can do whatever the heck we want with it because we've pulled the data in. Our goal, again, is to update an account record with the address information. Well, if you look here, we just pulled city, country, state, street, and zip. We just pulled all of that into our function. We can do stuff with it now. Good work, team. Now that we've worked on getting the contact data into this function, we need to start extracting the data that we'd actually like to work with. So we're going to be getting the street info to start with. But as we're doing so, I want you to think about this convention of naming variables. What we've done initially in line 1 is create what's called the contact record. Contact record is the object or variable in here that contains all of this really, really cool information. So the idea here is that we now have all of this garbage, this JSON, but instead of like having to parse through it and piece through it, it's now kind of consolidated into this one little contact record variable. So the idea is that because we've assigned a name to this action, all the data that this action is pulling now corresponds to this little name. That might not make a lot of sense. Hopefully this example will make sense. We want to pull the street information from the contact record, right? We'd like to update the account with street info. So let's type in street equals, we're going to name our variable, contact record dot get. Just type that out. That'll make sense a little bit later. But we're getting information essentially from the contact record that we just pulled. And then again, just write this verbatim, quotation marks, mailing underscore street. And let's do a semicolon. Now we're going to, in line 4, say info street, semicolon again. And now we're going to save and execute this again. So click on Obi-Wan Kenobi, bring up your contact record, double click on this to copy paste the contact ID, save and execute. Again, we're copy pasting the contact ID. Ho ho! So we see all this garbage again, boom. But we've also extracted the address. Now this is very, very, very important. You now have extracted some data from the contact record. Contact record is the name of all of this data. Street is now the name of just the mailing street from this data. So you just took all that big garbage JSON and extracted a tiny little piece of data that we're now going to use later in our function. So that's the concept of naming records, where we're taking actions and we're naming them so that we can refer back to them later in our function. Hopefully this is starting to make some sense for you. I remember when I was in your shoes, I would always ask, how the heck do I know what information to put into this red quotation marks? How do I know what the heck mailing street is? Now, seasoned developers will tell you one thing, and I'm just going to kind of cut to the fastest way of knowing this. Later in this course, we'll talk more about these red names, API names as they're called. Let me show you the fastest way to understand this. So you remember this JSON that we looked at, this big garbage that we copied into that JSON viewer? I want you to do that again. I want you to get used to working with this. So go ahead and highlight all of it, copy, and then again, you'll probably want to bookmark it. I'm just Googling JSON Viewer, and there's this link. I'll put it in the description again, online JSON Viewer. And now let's paste all of this data into our viewer, into the text. Now click this little viewer button, and you'll see dog on the right side. It's sorted in alphabetical order, all of our data, and you'll see mailing street with an underscore, case sensitive, is the name of this data that in Zoho CRM in the contacts record is just called mailing street with no underscore. In general, this is not a hard and fast rule. Most CRM variables, most API names are just the name of the field, case sensitive, with underscores for all the spaces. And you can see that in CRM, we have mailing country. In here, in the JSON, mailing underscore country. So that's where we get the name. That's how we tell Deluge, hey, from this garbage, isolate this little variable and get it for me. So that's a quick brief on these names. We'll talk about it more in depth later. I'm hoping that you can get into kind of a cadence. We've already gotten the street, but now I'd like for you to get into all the other 4 variables and kind of do it over and over to hopefully get used to it. So we have a street. What comes next? City. So we're going to name this variable city equals contact record dot get. Well, what's the name of our city variable? You can deduce that it's probably, if you look at the contact record, it's called mailing city. Let's deduce that it's called mailing underscore city, but we can check our JSON viewer and look, it is indeed mailing underscore city. I'm not going to look again because they all follow the same principles, but if you ever get stuck, it's always good to look into these names. You might have named it wrong. So we'll say contact record.get mailing underscore city. What do we put at the end? Semicolon. We'll go ahead and do an info city. Again, that's just to help us refer back and make sure we got the right info. Next, we will do the state equals contact record.get quotation marks mailing underscore state semicolon info state. Now we'll get the zip equals contact record.get mailing zip. Let's double check. Mailing zip, no caps, zip, just a capital Z, semicolon, info zip, semicolon, and then we'll do country equals contact record.get mailing country. And one more semicolon and an info country. Now, if we've done this correctly, we should see in our little info box when we save and execute, we should see that it's properly pulled in all of the address information. So let's save and execute one more time. Click on Obi-Wan Kenobi, the contact, copy the ID, and in the functions, we'll click save and execute, copy paste the ID, and you can see that it successfully brought in all of this information. We can compare it to our JSON viewer. That's all correct. And we can compare it to our contact record, and that's all correct. Okay, buckle up. The following is pretty straightforward, but it's going to be one of the harder things to grasp. It will make you feel super codey, though. You're going to feel so codey. You're going to go and brag to everyone that you are a programmer hacker after you do this. So remember, we want to get all this address information, but now we also want to update the account record. We're going to take all that address information and shove it into the account record automatically. Here's the problem. We need to know which account we're going to update. We can't just tell Deluge, update the related account. It needs to have the 19-digit ID of the account that we want to update. So if you click on the Republic, you can see this is the account we're trying to update, and this is the ID. Now, let's kind of get back to our JSON viewer. Actually, let's go to our contact module. I want to show this. This hopefully will make sense. You hopefully are familiar with the idea of a lookup module in Zoho CRM. Account name being a perfect one. Obi-Wan Kenobi works at the Republic. This is an associated record. This isn't just text or a string. You can actually click on this record and it will bring up the associated account. So it shouldn't surprise you that this type of field is treated a little bit differently on the back end of our JSON. So this contact info that we've gotten, this JSON, again, we're going to go back and refer to the online JSON viewer that we've copied the data into. And on the left side, let's go ahead and scroll down until we see account name. Now, this is interesting. It doesn't have any information. It just has these brackets and this little plus bar. Click the little plus bar and you'll see it gives us 2 snippets of information about the account. It gives us the name, that's great, but it also gives us the ID. it tells us the name of the account is this, but the ID is this 19-digit code that we're going to take, and that's what we need. That's great. Now, there's 2 steps that we need to do to get this information into our function. And again, this may make you feel a little bit queasy, but it's pretty straightforward. We're going to create a variable. We're going to call it account ID equals, and like the other get functions, we're going to do contact record.get. We're going to do 2 things. Number 1, we need to get the bracket, the kind of umbrella, which is account underscore name. So we'll get that. Quotation marks, account underscore name. Here's the problem. That doesn't give us the ID. Just doing account underscore name isn't going to give us the ID. The ID is actually sub data to the account name. It's kind of a sub level of info under that umbrella of account name. So you see this field right here, ID, lowercase, no caps, one exception to the rule of caps. So we're actually going to do on this same line another get function, dot get capital or quotation marks, lowercase ID, and then a semicolon. We'll do an info account ID semicolon, and we'll run this. But theoretically, we should be getting the account name and the ID of that account. Again, let's go back to our content. Let's copy paste the ID, save and execute, copy paste that ID. And you'll see that it gave us this account ID. Let's go ahead and compare it to the Republic's account. Again, this is in the URL of the account record, so I'll copy paste it into here. And you can see that it is the same indeed. So we've now pulled the ID of the account that we want to update into our function. One point to note as we're taking all of these info statements, they are extremely helpful, but the more info statements you add, you see we're now up to 6 or 7. You start to get lots of data coming through here, and it's hard to tell. You can get kind of confused as what it's talking about. Is Coruscant the state or is it the country? In this case, it's the same, but that can get kind of confusing, right? You just get a bunch of this unrelated data. So I just want to show you a real quick tip on your info statement. Just remember this verbatim. You can delete your little semicolon and do a plus, quotation mark, space, and now you can put in whatever label you want to label the data so that your info statement tells you exactly what we have. I'm going to do parentheses, street info, close parentheses. So if that's for my street, and then I'm going to do this for all of my variables. So I'll actually just copy paste this little code and tweak it. We need to, oh, I forgot, like a dummy, semicolon. So let me copy paste this whole thing again, delete my semicolon. We'll do city info for the city variable, zip info for the zip. We'll do state info there, country info there. We'll go ahead and do account ID info there. And now I want you to see, we're going to save and execute again. So I'll copy paste my contact that I'm working with, copy paste that ID, click save and execute, copy paste that. And you'll see one Jedi Temple street info, Coruscant city info, 84770 zip info, et cetera, et cetera. So it actually helps us name the variables that we're working with when we get them as info statements. Okay, we now successfully have gotten all of the info in the previous videos of this course. We have everything we need to successfully update our account, which we have the idea of, with this address information. Well, we need to actually put that data into the account record. So we've done getting. Now we're going to be talking about maps and putting. Type this out verbatim and we'll explain it more as we get a little further into the video. Just type out count update equals MAP parentheses semicolon. Now, I can tell you we're creating a map. That might not make as much sense right now. Let's go and put some data into the map, and I think it'll make sense. Do account update dot put parentheses, and then again, just type this out verbatim. I'll explain later. Quotation marks, billing, capital B, billing, street, and then outside of the quotation marks, comma, street, semicolon. Now, hopefully with that information, you'll be able to kind of understand what a map is. What a map is doing is saying, we have this variable of street. We look at our info statement, you'll see that our street is one Jedi temple, and we pulled that from the contact record. We did that in line 3. So we have this variable of street. Now, what we need to tell Zoho is, I want you to take that street variable, and where do I want you to put it? Well, I want you to put it, in this case, we're at the account level, into the billing street field. So a map is the object by which we are telling Zoho, take X, a variable that we've created, and stick it into Y, the name of the field in the module that we would like to update. Hopefully that makes sense. We're going to be filling out the rest of the map in the next video, so follow along and hopefully it'll make sense as you get more practice. Okay, now that we have this first line, hopefully it'll make sense. There's one other thing we need to think about before we move on. How did I know to put in billing, capital B, billing underscore capital S street? Well, if you remember the last video where we talked about getting these names, you're able to find that info in the JSON that we copy pasted for the contact record. However, we don't have a JSON for the account record. We haven't gotten any information. Now is a good time to introduce you to a very, very helpful feature in Zoho CRM. It's called API names. Go ahead and open up a new Zoho CRM tab, go to settings. Under developer space, you're going to click on APIs. It'll immediately be tabbed to usage. You want to click on API names. And here we have the information about module and field names in the back end of Zoho, in the API. Let's talk a little bit about what this means. You can call a field whatever the heck you want as far as Zoho is concerned. But the way that Zoho remembers a field, the actual internal system, how it knows that you're talking about the mailing street field in the contacts module, is by its API name. Now, those API names are often very, very similar to its actual name. You see leads, the API name is leads, contacts, et cetera, But let's actually go into the accounts module, and you can see one of the first big changes. There's no spaces in an API name. So the case is the same, but there's no space. There's an underscore instead of a space. We've kind of talked about that. There are other things. Account owner, well, you might deduce that it's account underscore owner, but no, for whatever reason, Zoho decided to call it owner. There are a few fields like that. You won't find that many, but there are a few fields like that you just kind of have to get used to, like account owner, where the API name is slightly different. And it happens enough that I encourage people, don't just try and guess the API names, get used to coming into this API name screen and finding the names for the fields that you would like to update. So we're going to be updating the billing fields. Luckily, they're all here for us, and you can see that they all follow the same structure that we've kind of gotten used to. Billing state, billing underscore state, country, etc. So let's get back to our function, and let's actually add all of these using the put function that we worked on. Count update dot put billing underscore city. What do we put here? Well, we're connecting the billing city field in the accounts module to the data that we've pulled for our city variable in line 5. So we'll type in city, semicolon. account update dot put billing. We have zip. Is that what it's called? Billing code is how it refers to. Billing code is zip. We're linking that to the zip that we pulled. Look in our info statement, that zip code. We'll do account update dot put, and we'll put in billing state. Let's make sure that's the right name. Billing state, that's correct. Billing underscore state, I should say. Call it state. And we'll do account update dot put billing underscore country, and we put in country data. So now you've seen that we've successfully found all of the API names for each field that we would like to update in the accounts module. We've matched them using put functions into the variables that we'd like to update them with, which is the address info from our contact record. Okay, we've now successfully assembled everything we need in order to actually make this function work. There's one final step. We've gathered the information from the contact record. We've told Zoho in our map, hey, we need you to update the account record with this information into these fields, put these variables that we've pulled from the contact. Now, finally, we need to actually execute the account update. So we are going to create a new variable. We're just going to call it update. And you should remember from the beginning of the video, when we first did the zoho.crm.getRecordById, we're going to be doing something very similar here. We're going to type in zoho.crm. Remember, we talked about all of these cool different options. We are going to be doing update record. Now, Zoho is very, very nice and gives us some cheat sheets of what needs to happen. I will explain them to you, but it's fairly straightforward. The first right here is it needs the module that we are going to be working with. So you can actually just scroll down and select it, or you can type out quotation marks, remember, be case sensitive, accounts. That's the name of the module that we are working with. The API name, I should say. If you're working with a custom module or something like that, remember that you can go to settings, developer space, APIs, and API names to find the API name of whatever custom module you're working with. In our case, though, accounts is just accounts. Now it asks for an ID. Remember we talked about earlier in the video, how does Zoho know which account we want to update? Well, we got the account ID. We pulled from the contact record the associated account, and we have that 19-digit ID. We're going to use that right here. It asks for a number ID. What's our number ID? Well, it's the variable account ID right here. Remember, we got that earlier. So account ID, that's our ID. And now our data map. Remember we talked about map. This is what we're telling Zoho to update. Take this field in the accounts module and put the information that we got in line 3 for street, etc. for city, etc. for zip, and on and on. So all of that, all of those instructions to Zoho of what to run are put in this account update map. So we type in account update. And finally, we put in a semicolon. Those are the 3 things we need. You tell Zoho what module to update, you tell it what specific record to update, and you tell it what to update within that record using this map that we created. So let's go ahead now and do an info update, which should be old practice to you by now. You should know how to do it. And in the next video, we'll actually run this and see how it works. The first thing that we need to do, we'll go ahead and click save, not save and execute, but save function. This is now saved it as an action that we can trigger. And now we will go to settings, workflow rules. Hopefully you have experience with other workflow rules, very, very similar. If you do have questions about workflow rules, we do have a course that covers those in brief. So let's click plus create workflow rule. Again, this is triggering from the contacts module. We will call it address account update. And again, this is very, very similar to other workflow rules, so I won't go in depth on creating this. We're going to say when we update street, the mailing street field on our contact record, that we would like to, for all contacts, execute a custom function. And it's already here for us. You can technically write a new function from this screen. I always like doing it first before you make your workflow rule. So we will click associate. And now we have successfully associated our function with a workflow rule. In the next video, we're going to test it live. Okay, let's go ahead and test it live. Let's say that Obi-Wan Kenobi is moving to another section of the Jedi Temple, and that he actually really needs to update his street address. Again, we have our workflow rule triggering off of the mailing street being updated. So let's go ahead and change this. We'll say that he's moving to 150 Galactic Senate Road. Same zip, same everything. They're all kind of in the same vicinity. Just the street is changing. So we'll click save. And there are a few ways to check this. We can obviously check the account record. One way that I always recommend is just click on the timeline, and you'll see that function address was called via workflow rule address account update. So we did successfully trigger it. Let's go ahead and go look at the Republic, and you'll see that the billing street was automatically updated. Our function works. Ta-da, we did it. Good work, team.